Hello and welcome. This is episode 11 of a podcast Engineer to Manager. My name is Alex Maestrenko. I'm a podcaster and advisor to the CDTO here in Kyiv City Council, Ukraine. In this podcast, we are diving into the essence of engineering management. We explore what engineering management is and what are the challenges and opportunities. For this journey, I invite experienced EMs from different parts of the world. Today's guest is Bobby Dorlos. Hello, Bobby. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
Yeah, cannot complain, as you say in the US. All good. Thank you very much. So, dear listeners, before we dive into the conversation, like this video and subscribe to the channel. More videos are coming towards our way. And speaking about Bobby, you have an extraordinary experience of 20 years in the tech and industry. And out of those 20 years, you spent 9 years for a company that has been called Twitter. I don't know if it's still called this way these days. Yeah, and as I'm saying this, I would like, again, you, dear listeners, go and write down what is your experience, because I would like to know, and what is the company where you spent the longest period of your time? Because 9 years, as in Bobby's case, is quite a lot, I would say.
Sure. For sure. I think the gray hairs speak for them too.
Well, you're not at Twitter anymore. You would have had more gray hair if you have stayed, probably. We don't know. You're also a speaker at different conferences, or you're focused on site reliability engineering, which has been your also great main focus at Twitter. And these days, you are sharing your experience by mentoring, coaching, and teaching the next generation of SREs, DevOps. Would you like to add anything? Is everything correct?
Yeah, that sounds correct. And in general, it's just an iteration in terms of my life journey. I've reached the point where I've worked so long and done this for so long that my experience is something that I feel is so valuable. And if there's one thing I can give back to the next generation is this knowledge that I've gained. I love to speak. I love to be on stage. So yeah, this is the next iteration of BobbyD is, speaking on stage and talking about my journey.
Nice. I didn't mention that you were one of the first person of color to become a staff engineer at Twitter, and that's a great thing actually when you think about it, because staff is you don't meet those people every day on the street, right? It's already outstanding achievement that you get within your career and your work.
For sure.
So congrats on that achievement.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
As we talk about Twitter, can you share how and why did you join Twitter at that moment in time?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those cool stories that whenever I meet people, first of all, like you said, there may not be an assumption of what I do because an engineer normally doesn't look like me per se. But then when I start to talk about the company I worked for and even achieving the title of a staff engineer, and I kind of like label as a senior staff engineer because you're always working towards the next promotion, right? Is that that journey started way back in 2013, I apologize, working at Twitter. And I've been in the industry since 2002. My path to Twitter didn't really follow the traditional route. I don't have a 4-year degree. I only did a 2-year technical school, certifications, and was just on the hustle and just learning as much as I can. And the thing that really drew me to Twitter was, obviously, I want to work out in Silicon Valley. My level of experience working in Fortune 500 or companies down here in South Florida was really reaching the peak. And I had an opportunity to go there and really step up the level of engineering, not just for me, but bring that to Twitter as an organization. Because if there's one thing that really drew me to that company initially was we're solving world problems, like world level computing problems, building large scale infrastructure, and hyperscale infrastructure that's servicing thousands of connections, millions of connections around the world. And it was just something that I couldn't pass up in terms of just my career growth and knowledge gain that I had. So when they came knocking, I was like, yo, I think I got the skills. Why don't y'all just, give me a chance? And it took a while.
So you were not looking for, they came to you as a established professional on the market?
Yeah, so this is actually
Wow.
a cool story is that I was working on something and somebody pinged me on LinkedIn. It was a recruiter that pinged me that seen some comments that I put online about a service that I was thinking about building or had some experience with, which is basically building and managing Linux systems at scale and building automation around it. That skill was something that Twitter was looking for because one of my first roles was a systems engineer managing all of the intake volume of all the computers and bare metal machines that landed in our data center. And their goal was to automate that, right? Is basically from the time that it hits the floor at the data center, we wanted it in production within, 24 hours. And the original SLO or SLA that we had was like we was delivering it within 2 to 3 weeks and it was just not
Mhm.
enough. So somebody seen me write something about it. They reached out and the conversation leads to one thing to the next. They fly me out to San Francisco. I know I can, talk very well and put words together and definitely talk about the thing that I love about technology. And before I left and fly back home, I already had an offer letter for me to figure out what I wanted to do. So it was just one of those unimaginable experience of being found, being recognized for my work, and then being asked to interview and obviously knocking out of the park in the process and obviously making some really large level contributions in my time there.
That's very interesting. So you basically didn't have to follow all the long recruitment process, and there it was like 10 years ago. The world has been different, and there you could just get the offer within one day of conversation. Obviously, technical and soft skills related conversations that you had on site to have a good match of the team and the personality with the company. Wow,
For sure.
that's great. That's great.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there, so I just imagine you kind of starting with this additional inspiration that you have after joining Twitter. And when you left 10 years later, did it feel the same?
Yeah, I will say that the excitement dials down a little bit compared to when you first walk in, right? Because when you actually get into a company, that's when you get to lift the carpet and you're looking under there like, oh, I didn't know all of this was there, right? But I will say that my time there really gave me a different experience because there's a mantra that we had working at Twitter, which is loving where you work. And I really fell in love with working at Twitter in terms of the impact that I was making, the community, the vibe, the people, the culture. And it was somewhere where I was well received in terms of being an underrepresented individual in this field of technology engineering and really setting the mark in terms of opening the doors for other people that look like me to work at a company like that. So those are like some of the impactful things that my journey close to a decade working there. And I more or less got to a point where I moved from that team that I mentioned earlier when I first started working in fleet management, data center engineering, and moved into site reliability engineering. And then that's when I was able to take my skills to the next level. And then also is like, now I'm not just building machines that are coming into the data center. I actually got a chance to build one of the world's largest compute clusters running Aurora Mesos. If you're familiar with Kubernetes, it's kind of the predecessor before Kubernetes and kind of after Borg that Google created. Unfortunately, we didn't really catch that win in terms of adoption, and unfortunately got left behind when Kubernetes came out. But it was a very large-scale orchestration system that managed hundreds of thousands of containers running on hundreds of thousands of nodes around the world. And nobody knew that I was one of 3 SREs that was running that whole thing, right?
Is it allowed for you to say this actually? Because
yeah. I mean,
okay.
it's noted that Twitter scale in terms of infrastructure wise, a blog post that we published. And I've been through the training on what I cannot say and what I can say.
Well, so basically, Twitter needs 3 engineers to run everything. So Musk did the right thing to do big cutoffs of lots of people.
Well, let me
Sorry for
rephrase.
them, of course.
Yeah. Let me rephrase that. I ran everything. I ran the compute cluster that was the foundation that all the applications got scheduled on. And it was a team of SREs, but we also had a team of software engineers on the same team. So my team consists of about 12 engineers, but 3 of us were actually site reliability engineers in terms of our responsibility. So in terms of just organizational wise, you can think of a really small team managing bare metal machine at that abstracted layer for applications to be scheduled in our data center. You can imagine the ratio compared to administrators in terms of operators or software engineers compared to the massive floor print that we created or we manage in terms of servers. So it is eye-opening when you really understand how large it was and how small the team was, and definitely something Elon Musk realize in terms of capacity-wise of how massive we became, and definitely something that as you start to let people go, you let too many people go, who's left to manage it if you're already working on a really small team, and that's where you run into those type of challenges.
Yeah, I work for the city, and we also have a data center here. And the capacity of engineers that you are saying is comparable, because we also have our servers in the city and outside of the city, and there are engineers serving the bare metal machines, and then we build up on top of that all the services and software that we are running for the city as well as for some country services. So it's really comparable, and I talk with those people. It's interesting how they operate and put the things together, and it's so old school and nice to walk in the data center and touch those bare metal servers. Like
for sure,
more engineers, they just let's spin off a container in AWS, and it's one of a time experience to go there inside in the data center actually.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I like to make sure I tell mentees when they're thinking about how easily we spin up virtual machines or scheduled containers is that it doesn't matter. You're going to have some physical hardware that is going to be running that process because you need a physical processor to do it. Even if it looks virtualized, there is some hardware that you're talking to. So there needs to be engineers that are managing that hardware, right? And definitely that one of the skills that I've was able to really get to a high level working at Twitter. And it's more or less those years of experience before I got there.
So basically you were going from a system engineer to SRE, gaining all the skills. And how did the growth in terms of the title happen? Because the software engineer title is, something specific, right? I'm just curious how that ladder, you were climbing that ladder.
For sure. And I will say that my track in terms of the path I take to climb that ladder will be different than others. But it does require a level of experience in terms of just understanding how things work, applying those, and then taking it to the next level. Is like one of the things that I was really good at is reaching across the table and working with other teams to integrate and introduce some principles and practices that we may have been doing, and or solving some really large scale challenges in terms of infrastructure design wise, right? It's taking a product or an idea from start to finish is really a representation of your ability to lead, not just in terms of technical leading, but also individuals, because you're collaborating with external and other organizations and teams. And I would say that my track to staff engineer really came to light when I worked on this project where we were more or less managing one of the world's largest compute cluster and partnering with one of the world's largest key value store systems that we have out there.
Mm-hmm.
And then ultimately leading a project that merged those two applications to run on the same bare metal machine is one of my noteworthy accomplishments. Becoming a staff engineer is just showcasing that skill. And I know I mentioned earlier, like senior staff, and you should always be working towards that next role. So you're kind of already doing those type of things, right? Even if you do go from, an IC track to management track, you want to make sure that you're showcasing those skill sets. And that was something that Twitter gave me the flexibility to do, is definitely to stretch my arms, stretch my legs, North Star thinking and shooting for it. And while you're going that way, you're ultimately showcasing those attributes to showcase that you have those leadership skills. And then the conversation becomes, hey, why hasn't Bobby been promoted type stuff? Because I'm able to make those impacts at a massive scale and also impact engineers' growth and development.
You're mentioning several skills that are that helped you actually. One was reaching over the table and kind of connecting people, talking with different people, working with them, solving their problems, I could imagine. The second one is basically setting your target and showing that you are going toward their target, kind of a North Star. Here is their thing that we are go, and basically setting their direction of for some division, department, whatever it was. What is their third essential skill for a staff engineer? What do you think?
Yeah, so I would say that obviously skills as an engineer is going to be reflective in your work, right? It's like you start to become a subject matter expert in different areas, and you're the one that plus ones code changes in certain code bases, right? Another cool thing about me is that I'm really an extrovert, so it's not something you commonly find amongst engineers. Is that I also supported organizations and internal groups. So this is kind of outside of engineering, is promoting and endorsing, the idea of diverse perspective, diversity, and pursuing those type of endeavors, from speaking at colleges, speaking at conferences, and definitely representing the Twitter culture so that we could increase diversity in our workforce. So it's not only the engineering and systems or software engineering skills that really enlighten people on your ability to be a leader in the organization. It's also those outside skill sets that sometimes organizations are yearning for because nobody else, has those attributes, that I was able to easily step into. I say easily because I like to talk, but easily step into, but also get the benefits of supporting the organization in different ways.
Yeah, so basically, you have to focus on soft skills as you grow on talking well, communication skills, right? And I would say also being empathetic to understand what other people want and need, and then you are kind of also diverging a little bit in their team lead role, as far as I understand, because basically in the leadership role. So did you have a team that you were leading, or you were more an IC in the team?
So the cool thing about my role was that I eventually kind of moved into a team lead role, but still maintain that connections to as an IC and as a contributor. But as a team lead, specifically for the SRE, that's a role that really foundationally came from ensuring that we're following the practices, because we've worked with a partner group called Software Engineers, and we all were under one organization, but two different management structures, right? And that second management structure for the site reliability engineer, I was definitely the team lead in representing that. But I also sat at another really cool table, was the team lead for the software engineer. And I sat at the same table as we're making decisions and direction and growth in the organization. So it was definitely one of those opportunities that, yes, my skills as an SRE, yes, my technical background provides value to my direct SREs. That didn't report to me because we still reported up to a manager, but I was the team lead. But then that also kind of allowed me to bring that into the conversation when we're talking to software engineers and a software engineering team lead, to make sure that we are number one, maintaining our reliability that we give to our customers, or we guarantee customers. Understanding how software is being designed and making those recommendations in terms of architectural things. And it was just one of those experiences where it was kind of like two team leads working collectively to manage this massive infrastructure. And we basically fed off of each other type stuff.
Nice. So you basically were creating a bridge between two teams together with your peer software engineer team lead. And
Sure.
well, this is a first team, right? So you were working with your first team a lot, and that's really what people recommend to do. Not focus on their team that you're managing, kind of, or leading, but rather focus on your first team to make sure all the connections within the organization are established and controlled and supported, and so on and so forth. And when you became a team lead, did anything change for you?
Did anything change for me? I think my voice got louder. It was definitely an opportunity for influence to be received a little bit different than, through someone else or through a manager. I got invited to more conversations, tables that
So
I wasn't.
more meetings, right?
Less coding and more meetings, right? And I laugh because it's so crazy that as you're climbing higher, you're kind of being pulled away from the keyboard either one or two ways, either moving into management or as becoming a tech lead in that, right? You're more reviewing docs. And I actually had a tech lead, a mentor of mine, tell me this one time. He said, your new IDE is going to be a Google Doc.
Well, a Google Doc and Google Spreadsheets are two of those, and then emails come on top.
For sure, for sure. But in general, that role as a team lead did shift my focus, where I was more strategic, and my voice in terms of influence became more foundational. It wasn't in a sense of like dictatorship, but I could really help drive the organization in a direction that I know from my experience working there, and definitely what direction in terms of product that we were heading towards. So it definitely shifted for the better, I feel, because we were able to really do some cool stuff while I was team lead during that time. And then open up opportunities for other engineers also to grow, because once you kind of move into that team lead, you have other engineers that are also, pursuing senior level or staff level that are able to step in those positions. So it was always really a trade-off that I felt was really good for us.
So you were kind of supporting the growth of the team, of every individual that you have.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
I had a very interesting conversation. Well, you'll get the link somewhere on the screen with our new manager in Red Hat, and how she came into her role and how she supports growing of her team to make sure that she can also make a next step and find the leaders in her team very interesting experience. Once you're survived it yourself, let's put it this way, then have to share it with others and how to make sure their leaders pop up from the team and how you recognize them. It's an additional thing that you have to think about. When you became a team lead, so you basically got more meetings, and then you also, the structure of your day changed, right? You had to fill some reports. You might have had some one-to-ones and so on and so forth. So can you share about that part, please?
Yeah, so I mean, if I were to take before coming team lead, definitely review board, my IDE, obviously console administrating, moving things around would be more of my day. Moving into that role of a team lead really required not just conversations with other team leads, but also with the manager, because the way that we structured it is that the manager did the people management and the team lead helped them set direction in terms of technical strategy and growth or development. And the key thing here is development is something that we observed during our transition as a team lead, is that we had some skill sets that we need to develop internally, and that's why we brought up other engineers in that process or other SREs. And overall, that means that my time is not just spent on those type of meeting, but coming up with strategies and ideas of helping engineers develop those skill sets, meeting with them on one-on-ones, and having those conversations like at a different level than you would with a manager, because we're really talking tech. And the cool thing is they're talking to BobbyD, right? And we're going to have a good time in the conversation we're having and the problem we're trying to solve. So that's kind of like where my ideal or my daily routine kind of shift is, that I was doing a lot more interaction with people interpersonally. This is a time that COVID wasn't around either. So we're in the office.
Nice.
We're hanging out in the cafe, having a conversation, and in general, just making the culture and the environment also be a part of this new way of leading other individuals, is taking advantage of those moments and really just creating a different type of bond than just, hey, I have a one-on-one and we have to sit here and, go through this list, rather than, hey, let's go to the barista, get a cappuccino, tell me about your day, and then I'll talk to you about this project that I'm thinking about you could work on type stuff. So those times I really do miss, because that right there was one of the cool things about stepping into that role of leadership, is that you can also showcase other people how you can lead in different ways. And it doesn't only have to be in this certain way. And then for people management, obviously we had a manager there to ensure that we keep everybody, HR compliant. But in general, definitely a great resource, or me being a resource to the manager allowed them to also extend in their roles and responsibilities.
And so basically there are SRE engineering managers that you had in the team. You were also kind of working as a peers, as far as I understand. So you were looking on the technical perspective, their development, their of people, their growth of them, and their manager has been looking on, well, as you said, HR compliant, basically making sure everybody on the same page, everybody is united as a team, and they're kind of possibly also doing their connection with other teams, or well, if you were SREs, just one team running the whole Twitter. I don't know which ones you had to connect to.
I don't want to downplay the SRE manager skills because they're very highly technical SREs themselves. I definitely rubbed some shoulders with a few that definitely could give me a run for my money in terms of skill wise. But the way that we had it structured was since I was considered an embedded SRE, we had a manager that managed other embedded SREs on different teams.
Mm-hmm.
So being the team lead for my embedded engineers, we also had a manager for the software engineers that the SRE manager and them two kind of had to make sure they keep their relationship going, right? Because the focus of reliability or site reliability is reliability, right? That's the key. Software engineers, they're trying to push out features. They want this new, button that does upside down flips type stuff. And SRE managers are the ones that help facilitate the conversation that were difficult for me to have at that manager level because organizationally they were respected for their skill sets and also what they bring to the table in terms of managing reliability. So they definitely supported us in terms of making sure we were in compliance with HR, but they were highly skilled engineers themselves and definitely provided massive value to the reliability and direction that the organization moved towards.
That's great to understand how it worked out because, well, as far as I know, with lots of companies hiring SRE engineering managers, they also require them to, well, understand their architecture principles, possibly be able to read code, not to code on a daily basis, but rather pass a coding interview or to make a code review, to basically have a common language understanding with people. And that's when you go to our other company that do not require EMs to be technical. For those, I typically say, like, look, you have to find and understand the language of engineers to be able to talk to them in their language. And you take whatever technical concept, Kubernetes, for instance, and you have to put it in 3 sentences with your own words to be able to explain what it is and how it works, like in very simple words, so that you have it in your head and then you can kind of follow the overall structure of the conversation that their engineers are having when you're present, right?
For sure. And that's a great point to bring up because I do have like some positive, negative feelings about technical managers and more micro managers that, I'm typing on the keyboard, their hands on top of it, right? That's not a work environment that I'm going to excel in. But I do need to have high level conversations where I'm debating a concept. And the manager is not the one that's making the decision, but the manager understands the challenge that I have in making sure that I have the right resources available to me so that I can make an effective decision. And that was the cool thing about management at Twitter was their role was to move people out of our way, right? It's like, hey, we're moving people out of your way. I understand the technical challenge. I understand what this business needs and I understand where you're at. And now I'm trying to work on making that close that gap because they have that understanding. So it was extremely valuable for managers to have those skill sets so that we can have those real deep conversations. And then the cool thing is that they will speak on that topic. They'll speak on your name outside of you having be there in the room and then also bring it up, right? So that was the real cool thing about having managers with those skill sets and definitely well respected in the industry.
Would a manager in that setup also sometimes question the decision that you are taking, in the sense not you're being unprofessional, but rather checking, helping you meaning engineer, to make sure that all the aspects are being taken care of? Sometimes we are tunneled in our view, right? And we might take your own decision. So the manager might come and slap on your face and say, like, look left, look right. Did you take a look? Yes. Oh, no. Well, okay. All right.
Yeah. I mean, we had a really cool culture of writing at Twitter. So for you to make a change that was really impactful, you needed to document it in some form. And one area that we had in our documentation was how many other options did you consider? Like, this is your solution, but what are the other things you considered, right? Once we add things like that into the documentation, I didn't really find it any like pushback from management, because most of the times if you're in the mud, that's your time to come out of the mud and be like, all right, let me try this. Let me try that. All right, let me document that I implemented this and it worked like this. And let me document it. I did this. And then the conversation is like, oh, I didn't even think about these 3 other ways. And I see the benefits. I understand it because I can talk the lingo. All right, yeah, it's easy for us to have those type of conversation. Before in the past, I definitely have felt that in other work environments where managers are dictating, the direction, and unfortunately, they lose sight of what it feels like to be in the mud and to be on the ground. And you are providing your best abilities in compliance with, what direction the company's going in. But I did find those experiences be more challenging compared to what we had at Twitter, which we say, hey, put in the extra work and go try 2 or 3 different ways. And then don't just get your peer that sits next to you to review it. Go across the room and go find somebody all the way over there that don't even know what's going on to give you some feedback. And that's what really made those type of decisions more founded for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's interesting setup. And well, sometimes a manager is the one who says like, look, Bobby, there is an architect or engineer there. Did you have a chat with him? Because he might have an interesting opinion. Not saying that you're wrong or right, or that person is wrong or right, but rather like, okay, go and talk to him to make sure that strings attached, connected with each other, and you had their double, triple check because you're making a decision that impacts business, right? Specifically with SRE, the lower you go, the higher the cost of their mistake that you might make as a person.
Sure. Yeah. And that's the collective mindset, right? We really embrace the idea of being a collective mindset. No one was an individual. We all working in a collective mindset and collective workspace.
If I can ask, when you're thinking about those types, you're obviously had some mistake that you made as a person. Well, we all make those. Can you share a cool story about one of them?
One of my mistakes or a mistake we've had before?
Whatever you prefer. You can share 2 stories. I don't mind if you have time for that.
Yeah, for sure. So I will say that one thing that Twitter is very, or used to be known for, is something called a fail whale. It's something that used to pop up whenever we reach certain thresholds, load, bearing type decisions like, hey, the load is too heavy. Let's drop some connections and we'll service these connections. But we also, in terms of the infrastructure team that I work on, specifically around the platform, had the ability to manage the underlying platform. And I mentioned that I worked on the compute platform. So anything compute, anything Kubernetes, mindset-wise or product-wise, so that you have a good reference point, our team managed. Unfortunately, there was one incident that happened where someone ran a command that I've run before. And this is why I like to tell this story, because sometimes you don't know that there's a bug just sitting in your environment waiting to explode. The command that the engineer typed was, for instance, Kubernetes cluster, kill this instance of this application. Mm-hmm. And the key thing is you have to make sure you define the instance. And if you misspell the instance or that instance does not exist, the scheduler unintentionally thought that mean shut everything down. So one of our engineers was running a command that we've run numbers of times for capacity management, shutting down development environments, making sure the loads and stuff like that. And he missed E at the end. I can't remember what the character was. And then all of a sudden, a page started to happen. And then this page started to happen. Everybody's starting the bells are ringing, because when we had an outage at the compute platform, everybody that was on top of us was off, right? So that command that he submitted said, shut down everything in data center A. I mean, shut it all down like that, right? And there's really no stopping it because the command is submitted and they're queued up and they're going through the process of shutting down. So that was in 2019. And in 2019, that outage is one of those outages that the world knows about, but they don't know that it was an engineer like me assisting and helping bringing it back up, right? So I have a story that I tell that in the process of fixing, resolving the issue, because we need to do it in a distributed way, we need to notify all the nodes to do some type of action. I type a command and I'm like, all right, hit the enter button. And I'm just waiting in the chat room, listening, and like people start to say, hey, is things starting to work? I was like, oh, there's bells to my ears. And another person says, hey, does this thing start to work? And before you know it, CNN even reports that Twitter's up and running. And nobody knew that I was the engineer that typed in the command, enter, and just sat back and relaxed and waited for it to commit, right? And in general, that's one of the outages that is so noteworthy to my career, because it really showed me, because it's also something I had a difficult thing to relate to, is like, how does my work really relate to Twitter? That right there was a prime example of how my work relates to it as a site reliability engineer. Is if the site is down, someone like me is actively working out, fixing, solving, identifying, and then obviously remediating and having postmortems afterwards so we don't have that type of issue again. But nobody knows it was an engineer like me that was doing it.
Well, now everybody through this conversation will know it here, and it's great to kind of have that feeling that you are, as an engineer, you're influencing something bigger that people are relying on. And if CNN goes viral and talks about it, then basically everybody here needs that service, that application, that thing that you are operating. And well, let's talk on something not technical, because we know what's happening to Twitter these days. It's already not Twitter, it's X, recently, and we know the joke that we were dreaming about flying cars, but we got 7 Twitter apps like Threads or the Blue Sky, and well, there are several others. Do you feel sorry for Twitter when you say this?
Yeah, I mean, the tough thing is that one thing you quickly realize when you work for a company is a lot of your contributions, the world might never know that you were the person to contribute to it, right? I know that we have a culture of open source in Silicon Valley, but a majority of the work that I wrote or worked on is all closed source and nobody will ever see it, right? And the thing that hurts the most for me is a lot of my heart, sweat, and these gray hairs are dedicated to those repositories that in time will either be deprecated, and this just happens with software engineering, is going to be iterated out. There's no doubt about it. But the thing that really stood for the work that I've done and the accomplishment that I've achieved was Twitter, the brand, and the Bluebird per se. When I'm walking these streets and people know what that means, is going to be lost in terms of history. And my main thing is like, what about my kids? Imagine I tell my kids the same story I told you, and I say the blue bird, and they're gonna be like, what are you talking about, a blue bird? There's not, I know about an x.com. Yeah, I know about that. Right? And then it's like, that part of history, I feel like is something that I have to deal with and iterate with in terms of just where my contributions were at the time. And that's why I like these opportunities to speak at podcasts like this, so I can tell some of these stories that no one has ever heard. And then in terms of the product itself, it's definitely the microphone of the world is the way that we described it. It was the place where anybody, anywhere in the world could send 140 characters, at least when it used to be, send it and reliably broadcast it out to everybody. And that reliability or reliable part is the thing that I know I had an influence in, like how consistent and reliable the platform was for people to be in unfortunate situations like earthquakes, in any situation, and being able to broadcast it out and reliably be there. That's the part of the service that I feel like has been lost in all of the politics in terms of purchasing, buying a company, changing the direction and stuff like that. Is that I hope it still maintains that foundational thing as being a public conversation that anybody can send a tweet and really anybody's there to receive it. Those are the reasons why I was so in love with the company and enjoyed it so much, because I did make an impact to the world. Unfortunately, it might be swept away in time as time goes. But other than that, other platforms are going to come out. I think Meta pulled a nice little move to release Threads. I think all of the blockchain and open source Twitter kind of replacements are really kind of an area where I think we'll continue to iterate to find the right place and right home for those type of conversation. I'm not sure if X will be that place moving forward, but I know as people in this planet, we are still looking for a medium for us to be able to communicate that way. And I don't know where it'll land. We'll see who wins out of this microblogging war that's going on.
Yeah, well, it all looks like, as we are now talking and reading the news, that Twitter is here to stay for a while yet, because with Threads, they kind of gained a lot of new users, but then it dropped significantly. I read somewhere like 70% of people never went to Threads, like myself. I registered in one of their first days to check it out, but I never ever posted or went back there, because basically it's not where the conversation happens. Your all conversations are on Twitter, right? Or on Facebook with your family. It depends on the context of where you're staying. And you basically worked to kind of separate those people and community that you're interested in to follow, to interact. And now you are being brought to, well, a nice application, but without the communities and without the prior experience that you had.
Yeah, for
Therefore, it's kind of hard to break Twitter, but Elon is doing his great to accomplish it.
We'll see. But you're right in terms of like user growth strategy. And that was why one of our things in terms of just the platform itself compared to what Facebook, Instagram is that community, that ability to connect to people is so valuable for your growth. And if you don't have that, you may get stall in terms of just novelty. Like, hey, yeah, I have a Twitter account because I'm, a techie that walks in Silicon Valley, and of course, yeah, I got a Twitter account type stuff. We broke that barrier in terms of once we start to have celebrities having more general conversation, and obviously when advertisement got there, that means the mass was there enough. But in general, you are right. You can see, and obviously the metric will show everybody flocks to a platform when it first comes out, but can they keep them? And that's more or less the results that some companies are going through right now. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. We'll see.
Yeah, okay, curious. And you mentioned several times the repository is that nobody will see. Is there anything else that you're missing from your Twitter days?
Yeah, I would definitely say the people, the culture was something that was one in a billion. When I first started working at Twitter, 2013, I was probably one of only 5 Black engineers in the whole company. It's something that was
how big was the company at that point in time?
I don't know the numbers specifically, but it was 2013, right before IPO. So we were on a ramp up for growth. So we were doing a lot of hiring. So I really don't know off the top of my head,
Yeah,
but
I'll check out on the internet and put somewhere here the number so we know for sure.
For sure. I don't want to misspeak, but in general, there was only 5 of us. To go from that 2013 to when I finally left, and there was hundreds of Black engineers, hundreds of other individual contributors that looked like me. That journey itself was something that was extremely impactful to my growth because I had a direct influence in that. A lot of people don't know that I was one of those engineers that was shouting from the mountaintop about diversity and what it means to feel like I'm included and I'm seen in an environment where they tell me on the first day, be yourself, Bobby. And I was like, are y'all sure you want me to be myself? Because I don't know if, and they said, yo, be yourself. I was like, all right, then this is what it really is. And that's also the thing that opened me up as an engineer. As soon as I feel like a place, I feel safe, I feel seen, I feel recognized. Of course, I'm going to be doing some great things. And that's something that I really miss in terms of the culture and the environment and just the passion that engineers, individual contributors had for this platform is something that outside of the technical side that I do miss because it was very unique. And I'm not sure if it'll ever be created again. And definitely an environment for somebody that looks like me to flourish. That's why I'm out here talking about this.
Yeah, great. And you also share your thoughts and spread the voice about equity, inclusion, diversity on various places. Like you recently were at Lead Dev in London. You talked about their unmasking imposters, debugging doubts. Can you share a few words about that speech?
Yeah, so I got to deal with that surname thing a little bit while I was out in London. Like surname? What? Yes, Mr. Dorless. But one of the cool things is I got invited to speak at a conference that's a leadership conference for staff engineers and above. It's called Lead Dev StaffPlus. Now, Lead Dev and StaffPlus are 2 different conferences, but they actually hosted both of them in London this year. And I was invited to be the keynote speaker for the first day and closing out the event. And as you mentioned, the topic that I spoke about was unmasking imposters by debugging doubt. It was really just about what it felt like being who I am in an environment that's a hyperscaled infrastructure. Millions of people uses your platform, how terrifying it is to be a part of a group that's managing that scale, and how we put into practice different strategies around reducing that feeling of being an imposter. And especially if you're underrepresented, I know that heat is even turned up even more. And one thing that we really got good at on our compute team was coming up with different strategies to kind of run different type of exercises. One of the exercises I talk about is red and blue, where there's a red team that's breaking the test cluster, and then the blue team is the one that's managing and bringing it back up. And this type of interaction created such a bond on our team that we started to introduce it every quarter because it definitely solidified people's awareness of their skill sets, but also made them feel like they're part of the crew, right? Like they're part of the team because they know how and what's all the stuff going on. And the talk that I gave at Lead Dev was really foundationally off of removing that feeling of imposter syndrome from a different perspective, because it wasn't the individual that we asked to get over imposter syndrome. We actually had the team create a more inclusive environment that invite people, let them know, hey, I know it's going to be tough, but if the fire alarm goes on and the lights turn off, just give me a call because I'm here type stuff, right? And it's something that just changed how people developed under my team as a team lead, as SREs, but also the SWEs on the other side of the table because they just felt like they were part of the crew. And those are type of talks that I do, talking about the different ways to embrace diversity in that capacity, but also changing the conversation around what teams can do to make it a more inclusive environment. And that was actually about 2 months ago in London. And it's by far one of my best talks that I feel like I've done. And definitely looking forward to redoing it and speaking on other stages about the topic.
No, as far as I understand, it's not only about inclusion, but it's also about the trust that you establish within the team to make sure everybody is included, everybody is open for the to the conversation, to make sure they speak openly about their problems or speak about the challenge that they are facing, and they have no fear to communicate about technical and their sometimes personal problems, because they influence your productivity. When you have some problem at home, you basically need to make sure somebody says, well, okay, or go and have a vacation, or find somebody or a doctor who can help you, but not work here on the computer, because this is counterproductive. You might break things that we were building up all together, including you. So just take a rest and make sure you're covered.
There's only a few fail safes that we can put in for Git hooks, right? There's only a few, right? Other than that, there's only a few we can put in. But in general, you are right. And thank you for bringing that up in terms of just another value around that topic itself.
As you mentioned, the conference was StaffPlus and Lead Dev. So basically you had both, let's say, around engineering management, leadership, and staff engineering. Let's talk a little bit about those two directions that I would say lots of ICs are facing their choice. Where should I go? Should I stay on the technical path and grow and continue with coding? But as we hear, when you grow, you still change your IDE, or should I go to management directly and make a conscious choice and basically say, okay, well, my IDE is no more there, though some managers still manage to code. So what is your distinction, and when and how should we take, our listeners are they are facing, how should they take the choice over one path over the other?
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely something that was presented to me, especially with my personality, and management was something that I've been spoken to for a long time in my career growth. For me, I've always stayed away from management because it definitely took me in a position where I know I had to distance myself from the keyboard intentionally to be an effective manager. I think that technical managers have a challenge of, on that seesaw. And unfortunately, one side is going to lack versus the other. And then you don't want to have unexpected expectations, such as, hey, managing people in terms of load, you're losing your technical skills. And now you have this requirement for you to implement something at a very high technical level from a management perspective, right? Or management position. So I've always avoided that. And I really was excited when joining Twitter in terms of organizational wise, they had it structured in a way that senior engineer wasn't the end of your growth on the IC ladder. There was staff engineer, principal engineer, distinguished, and fellow. Like, it's like following those tracks allowed for my influence to be broader. And that's what really I enjoyed about becoming a staff engineer, because it wasn't my influence on my individual team. It was not only in my group, but now I'm getting bigger into the organization. And then if you get high enough distinguished, you're at the company level, right? And you're still having the technical side of the conversation that really represents what you're involved in on a daily basis. You may not be at the keyboard, but I guarantee you, you're still reviewing code. You're still giving a +1 here or there, or the documentations that the engineers that are coming up are really going to reflect the type of media they need to create so that they can get influenced by you. An example, as an engineer, staff engineer, I eventually made shifts in documentations to include code snippets or
Mm-hmm.
include sample code or include an MVP repository. So when you send a document to me, I'm looking for that button, click that. All right, let me go read the code and see what they're working on, right? And then give my +1 in terms of moving forward, any type of architectural design or implementation or changes. And that was something that I always felt like once I started to pursue that ladder or be on that ladder, that I didn't lose as much touch to the code or to the console. And then when it comes to management, this is organizational things that really has to be defined where those lines and barriers are. And I found that it very effective when you really do have an understand that managers are there to help move the business decisions forward, moving people out of the way, and then also taking consideration you as an individual, because you don't want a manager to lose sight of that. I've worked with managers and directors that they just have so much on their plate that I don't get that individual attention that I need for my growth.
Mm-hmm.
And without that, you will have engineers not leveling up and moving up in their career, but becoming more stale and stagnant in their growth. And that's where it's like, hey, the manager's role is to ensure that those paths are defined. Like a manager conversation is like, hey, when I know you're ready to be promoted, like, why haven't we gotten there? Like, what do we have to do going in this direction? Right. And those are the conversations that I find are really suitable for that type of role and responsibility. So that's why when I had the decision, I still want to stay on that IC ladder. And I know as I grew, I may not be at the keyboard, but I still will be able to help influence. And then with management, I've always felt like, hey, I didn't want to play the seesaw game, because I know that it's important to manage people as individuals, and watch them grow. As you said something earlier, like the real effective manager is managing people for the growth into the positions that they will take on next, right? Not just keeping them where they're at, but also finding out who on your team is the next team lead or who has these attributes as management, and helping them develop and see if that's something that they're interested in. So that's why I've always felt like those lanes were separate, and have worked very effectively for me in my work environment.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, sir. It's well interesting how you separate them, and when you diverge at one point in time, you brought several topics. So one was what is your influence as an engineer? So you influence a team, you influence a product, you influence a set of products, you influence basically the community. When as you grow as an engineer from the junior engineer towards their fellow, because fellow, well, we all know like Rob Pike or Guido van Rossum, who are fellow engineers. Well, come on,
Yeah.
guys. They influence the whole world with their languages that they developed, right? When you were growing and basically going to a staff engineer, did you feel that you have a bigger influence and responsibility based on on your new role?
Yeah, I think with any promotion, you should expect the load to get a little bit heavier in terms of responsibility, because you're expected to kind of step into that role. And remember, like once you become a senior engineer, you're thinking about the next level, senior staff engineer. Or like when I was at Twitter, I'm already thinking about principal engineer. So what are the principal engineers, and how does that influence happens, right? And then finding mentors and peers that I can connect to make sure that I can see what the moves I need to make. So that's why it's like those feeling of those type of responsibility will definitely be increased. And my thoughts are is that you want to fill that weight. You want to fill a new weight, right? It's almost like when you like. My dad used to have this thing where he walk around the neighborhood with a weight jacket on, and then you see him another week later, he had another 5 pounds, another 10 pounds, and because before you know it, the 10 pounds that you had on there a week ago, it feels like nothing, right? You need to add more, because that shooting and pushing yourself forward is what's going to allow you to ascend to those positions. So feeling that And it's something that I feel like you should be ready to receive and look forward to, because soon as you don't feel that jacket on, that's when you know you're not pushing yourself hard enough. It's kind of like a way to bring it all together.
Yeah, you're in comfort zone. Just make sure you stay there for a bit to get comfortable within it, to breathe out, breathe in, and then make a next step. Basically, you're within your growth. And talking about the next step, is a staff engineer and their path to principal to fellow. Is this does it lead to CTO as well, or CTO would stay somewhere to the side of the engineering track?
Yeah, so CTO is a little interesting role. It really, for me, and this is just my professional opinion, it depends on what iteration the business is in, right? If the business is at incubation, early startup, a CTO might actually be writing code. You wouldn't be surprised, right? And then the distance from when a company's ready to go IPO, the CTO role will shift and change. Is you really do find CTOs that have had that track of being an engineer and understand what it means to be an engineer. And that's one of those things that is so valuable to me in terms of just seeing the growth of CTOs, is like, what path did they take to get there? One of the last CTOs that working at Twitter was Parag. He eventually became the CEO, and then eventually Elon Musk purchased. But I remember when Prague was an engineer at the keyboard committing code at a very high level, because organizationally he was contributing at a higher level. So I could see it happen. It just depends on the organization. If it's like a tech company, a software engineering company, you can definitely see that path. If it's in a different market and those skill sets may not be the things that are most important to the organization or the company growth, they may have followed a different path. But for me, I feel like a CTO role may be something I'd be interested in the near future. Do I have enough experience? I think the systems I've built, the people I've managed, and the experience I've gained being a tech lead and also being involved in an organization at that high level definitely gives me a path towards it. But I don't think it's like a standard path that everybody follows.
Would you go to a principal engineer or to CTO? What would you prefer?
I think a principal engineer is where I was definitely heading towards. I think the influence at a principal engineer really, in terms of that circle, your circle's getting even broader. And I think what I've seen as examples, principal engineers at a platform level, organizational, like, hey, it's like one level, skip level from the CTO type thing, and that type of influence. And then in terms of your partner in crime, you're kind of like the group manager or the general manager of the technical side of the house is kind of the person that you're providing your resources directly to. And then I would say distinguished and fellow kind of goes up even higher in the ladder.
And there, well, as we're talking about engineering management, and their audience is interested in that question, and you were partnering a lot with their other engineering manager, and also for this conference talked about their leadership. What, from your perspective as a partner to EM, would be 3 skills that are important for EM? Whatever technical soft skills, whatever you think are important.
Yeah. EMs is understanding and knowing their gaps. And those gaps are either development areas that they can develop, or gaps that they can fill in terms of the partnership that they will have with a team lead or tech lead, right? And then leaning on your tech lead and understanding the value they bring to the conversation in terms of closing those gaps. Another great thing about EMs is communication. Communication is key. And it's not just communication and, oh, I'm just want to check in, or I'm just checking in, I'm checking in. No, communication is, hey, Bobby, how was your weekend this weekend, right? Like just being interpersonal and just chill and communicating, and then following up with, hey, I want to, check in on the status of this, right? Those things are 2 different type of reaction you'll get from engineers when you first initiate that conversation. So communication. The other one is I'm always interested in managers and directors, or managers and leaders that are always looking to ascend into new positions and new opportunities, right? because I don't want you to also have the same thing that we're telling ICs not to have, is not get ready to put on this backpack, is having managers working towards their growth. Either they're working towards newer opportunities in terms of expanding their teams, or responsibilities in terms of supporting other managers, but also mentoring. Like, one of the things I love to see is when I have a manager that also mentors other managers. It's like, oh yes, I'm grateful for to have you as my manager, because you're setting the example moving forward and also setting the path for your growth going forward. So those would be the three things that I would definitely break down in terms of the things that I've seen as very effective from an EM's perspective.
Yeah, the last one is basically being inspirational to make sure that you grow as a professional, whatever you're doing, either being a manager or being an engineer. But everybody can show with his or her own example. Kind of, that's what drives me, right? That's what I like. That's where I want to go. That's when I want to go deep and be professional there and make a next step. And they're basically not stay on this level and kind of bring the same attitude to work. Like, okay, well, it's Tuesday, guys. What are you doing? Monday finished. All right. What are the challenges you had? All right. Tick, 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 tick. No. That's not going to work. You have to bring your passion to the team, and then also it basically lights up the whole team to move forward, and but not overact or kind of overbring it, because when you bring too much of your personality, then it's also bad, because we should stay professional, right, within their professional topic, and not talk for 40 minutes out of an hour about your dog or about your last vacation.
For sure.
So it's a good balance. It's a good balance to keep. But thanks for these 3 tips. I really like the last one. You worded it in a very nice way, and I definitely haven't heard so far anybody speaking about this one. Kind of for making sure that their person is inspirational and showing his or her vision toward the future. I would like to be mindful about your time, because we already 1 hour at their conversation. Thanks for joining here. I know you're running a podcast and also doing some blog posting. Can you share a little bit about those so people can find you on their internet and follow you and read?
Sure. Let me get a little plug for the Tech Hustle. So the Tech Hustle is a brand that really does focus on teaching and showcasing these skills to the next generation, and really impacting my community directly. We're running a newsletter that we are evolving into a podcast newsletter tech company. I'm constantly iterating, and that's the cool thing about starting your business, that it could be whatever you want, right? But our main focus area is publishing newsletter on a weekly basis every Thursday, talking about technology and engineering and how it intersects with the Black culture, and how all of us can level up in the process. You can find us at thetechhustle.com, which you'll definitely include in the description.
We'll put the link in the description below.
Thank you. And like I said, we publish on a weekly basis, so definitely follow along. It's myself and 2 other underrepresented engineers or technologists in the field of engineering, and we really do enjoy just having general conversation. And we'll continue to iterate, and this will be one of the platforms to follow along so you can see what we're working on next. We do a podcast. We kind of read the newsletter and then have conversations around it. That's all under development. And then obviously I speak on stages around the world to talk about tech and represent the Tech Hustle in terms of a brand everywhere I go. So thank you for the plug, and definitely looking forward to getting some new subscribers. So follow along, for real.
Yeah, thank you for being here. It has been a very nice conversation to understand how Twitter works at your time, and meet you, one of the persons who were running infrastructure for Twitter. I enjoyed their connection with the management. Thank you very much for finding the time, and it has been a pleasure to have you as a guest.
Definitely, and very much appreciate it, and definitely be safe out there. Thank you so much.